Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Let's have a moment of silent meditation, and just, if you can, if you'd like to, just open yourself up to the day and ask God to have an open and honest relationship with your higher power. And maybe today, it says God couldn't would if he were sought, and maybe we can seek him together today. Let's take a moment of silent meditation before we begin. Thank you. This morning we're going to continue with our overview of the steps a little bit, and then we're going to get through the first three steps, maybe take a chunk out of step 4 before we break for the morning. I'm just having a great time. I'm a complete wuss when it comes to temperature. I grew up back east. I live in Southern California. I'm a desert rat. I have absolutely no capacity to deal with the cold at all. I woke up last night. I put on all of my clothing and went back to sleep. My younger son, Jesse, is attending the University of Chicago right now, and he grew up in Southern California, so he's experiencing, I'm sort of living vicariously through him. This place is so beautiful. It's so gorgeous, and this is such a great group of guys. I talked a little bit about the fact that I used a lot of drugs last night, and yet I don't identify as a drug addict or alcoholic, which is just me. That's just me. I almost died from drug addiction and from alcoholism, and I fancied myself a drug addict. And for me, it was a near fatal mistake. And a lot of guys say drug addict, alcoholic. I don't indict anybody. Everybody's, again, this is why I'm sure God made more than one of us. I had, when I first came in Alcoholics Anonymous, there was still a lot more controversy about talking about drugs at meetings than there is now. I hear it and see it a lot less now. Unless somebody simply does not identify as an alcoholic, then one wonders at all. Then one wonders why they would actually be attending an AA meeting, or at least participating. That seems a little odd, but again, I judge no man, and you know that because I constantly say it. My first home group, which I called the Edge of the World group, Unit A, when I first came in, I was terrified because there was a lot of controversy, and there was one guy there, a couple of guys who saved my life in my first couple of weeks of sobriety, and I told you I wasn't an alcoholic because I was Jewish, and my first couple of weeks at this group, this guy identified, he said his name, and he said, I'm an ex-Catholic, which means I don't believe in God, and I'm therefore positive God is going to come kill my ass for feeling that way. And I said, okay, I'm going to go sit near him. Because I had been introduced to an Old Testament God that I would not be caught in a dark alley with. This God got your ass no matter what. He turned your wife to salt, killed your goat, put a finger in your eye, and got you no matter what. And you had to speak a foreign language to talk to him. And I was, hip, slick, and cool, growing up in the Bronx in the early 60s, and I wanted James Dean. And my Hebrew name was Shlomo. And and I had to go to Hebrew school 3 times a week, including the day they had Little League and stuff. And my hatred for this stuff was beyond anything, And I wanted a Shlomoectomy. I wanted out of Shlomo as fast as I could go, man. I wanted out of it. So when I came, and it's so beautiful in our book, the way it's laid out, the 2nd chapter and the 3rd chapter, talk about the condition, talk about the strange mental twist, which is our cachet. That's what we bring to the party. That's what we offer the alcoholic that no one else can offer them. Everyone else, or most everyone else, says, how could you do it? And we go to them and go, how could you not do it? There's only one thing that will help you to not do it, and that's actually the power that runs the universe. Nothing less will do for you, young man. Which for me, as a grandiose, self-centered person, is good news. I don't want anything else. I want the power that runs the universe. My friend Cliff called one of his sponsees after the Hubble telescope went up. He said, Lamar, I've got news for you. He said, Lamar, what? He said, the Hubble telescope has discovered billions and billions of new solar systems and universes where no one's thinking about you. At any rate, I needed this drug alcohol thing cleared up for me. I didn't really get it cleared up until I worked the steps, and I took the picture of my alcoholism. For me, the picture of my alcoholism was taken in my 4-step, and I got to take a picture at the whole thing of what the spiritual illness was, which has nothing to do with substance. Has nothing to do with substance. Now, the notion, you've heard people say, well, it's all the same disease. Drug addiction, alcoholism, overeating, sex. I heard a guy say that the guy who said that it's all the same disease, that was originated by a recovery home that only had one van. Yeah. Which is, I swear, one of the best things I have ever heard in my life. Because that's true for me. It's only the same disease if you have it. And a lot of guys have one or two or three, but don't tell me it's the same disease. Well, you can, but I judge them. But I certainly don't feel that way. And I've heard, so at this meeting, there was this old junkie who just pissed off the old timers so bad because he talked about drugs all the time, on purpose in front of them, and he had a lot of time, which really pissed him off, because usually they go, oh, he won't be here. This guy was, had over 10 years. And one morning, and he was like kind of saving my bacon because he really let me know what the traditions were about and that I was safe, And one morning he raised his hand and he said, man, it's unbelievable what goes on in my head. He says, that after Urban Cowboy, the movie was released, everybody ran out and bought cowboy boots. And he said, like a good junkie, I ran out and bought $500 green anaconda skin cowboy boots. And I wore them once, and I looked at them, and I never wore them again. He said, every morning when I open my closet, those boots look at me from the back of that closet, and they say, hello, asshole. And I said to myself, yeah, everything's talking about me. Everything's talking to me. And I was 2 weeks sober, and everything was jumping out at me, You know when you're new and every part of your face is moving in a different direction. You look like you just walked out of the GM wind tunnel, and your head hits the pillow, and it becomes a rotisserie, and you just fry. And you're trying to relax and go to sleep, and there's a vein pumping on your forehead like a garden hose, just feeding this breeder reactor of a brain, that's just, I always thought my brain felt like a metal dog dish left too long in the sun, so that when a fly landed on it, it would just go, sometimes a guy with time will get to a podium and he'll say, geez, I feel like a newcomer again. And I kind of, because I'm so non-judgmental, I'll sit in my chair and I'll go, no, you don't. No, you don't. Now, I'm not saying you're not hurting. You could very well be hurting. I'm not saying you're not in agony. You could be in agony. But you don't feel like that. You don't feel like a new guy who's shaking drugs and alcohol out of his spinal fluid. You don't feel like that. And if you think you feel like that, odds are you're not spending enough time with new guys. Odds are. One guy said to me the difference between a drug addict and an alcoholic is, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, a drunk will steal your money, go downtown, spend it, get loaded, come back, crying, weeping, tell you what he did. Drug addict will steal your money, go downtown, get loaded, come back, help you look for the money. I've also heard, and this is just one of my favorite stories, is this guy came to me and he said, look, I need $100, my kids are starving. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to give you the 100 because you're just going to spend it on dope. And he said, no, I've got dope money. laugh at an Al-Anon meeting. I'll tell you that. I don't think that's very funny. You know, if you're new, you're going to hear some pretty nutty stuff about alcoholism now that you're here. You'll hear it outside, sometimes inside the rooms of AA, but you'll hear it outside too. You'll hear even people say, to me, one of the wackiest things, which is, don't you think AA is just a crutch? Now, that's kind of like saying to somebody who has diabetes, are you still like using insulin? Can't you show some backbone, some gumption? What is wrong with you? Alcoholism is viewed as a disease by the AMA, the World Health Organization, and virtually every organization of professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors on the planet. Alcoholics Anonymous has the biggest aggregate of recovery of any treatment for the disease anywhere in the world. We've gone from 2 to 2 million with no promotion in 65 years. We're in 150 countries. We've got way in excess of 125,000 groups. But if you're new, I'm sure this won't work for you. So this notion that AA is a crutch is not only fallacious but wrong-headed. And you know, the funny thing is you're going to hear a lot of stuff about alcoholism, general kind of sweeping statements about alcoholism in the program that many of which don't work for me. They don't work for me and they're not true for me. And not one of them have I found in the first 164 pages of the Big Book of AA. I've heard people say that alcoholics don't like change, just in general. Well, I just don't like change I don't like. But I'm nuts about change I like. I'm crazy for it. Love it, bring it on. Now some guys don't like change, good or bad. But to offer it up as a generalization about alcoholism doesn't work for me. And I'm just saying, if you're new, if you hear any of this stuff, and it sort of, if you identify with it, great. And if you don't identify it, before you condemn AA for it, take a look at what AA is all about. I've even heard at AA meetings that alcoholics are above average intelligence. I have only heard this at AA meetings. I have never heard it anywhere else. I have certainly never heard it at an Al-Anon meeting. Ever, ever, ever. And I'm not saying we're not smart, but just as a sweeping generalization, saying that alcoholics are above average intelligence. Man, oh man, oh man. In the 1800s, around the time of the Civil War, there was and before, there was an organization called the Washingtonians. The Washingtonians are a great group for the members of Alcoholics Anonymous to learn about and study on some level. And they're mentioned in the Big Book in AA Comes of Age. And here, by the way, is that they're also mentioned at great length in this book. I brought down a copy. If anybody wants to take a look at it, it'll be here. This is the non-conference proof literature I was talking about yesterday, Not God. Which is just a great, and it's an interesting thing. Kurtz came to AA to do a paper on it as a scholar, and then wound up joining AA. He wrote a subsequent book called The Spirituality of Imperfection, which is a fabulous book. But the first section of the book is this wonderful history, and then the second section is a little more intellectual, kind of bookish, and that's the paper that he wrote on AA. Which at first I read the history, which I got a lot out of, and then later on I returned and read the rest of it, which is a little thicker, but still quite terrific, because he brings up and discusses stuff that's not discussed in our literature, because it would probably be inappropriate to, that I find to be really enlightening. I love that stuff, like the stuff that's not completely explained in the literature. You know, in the description of Tradition 3 and the 12 and 12, they talk about a guy who had problems, like incredible problems. They didn't know if they should let this guy into the group, and I always wanted to know, what did this guy do? What was his deal? And in fact, it's explained that the guy, this was like in the 40s, and the guy was an African-American, homosexual, drug-addicted ex-con. It's as if his spaceship was parked outside. I mean, for this group at that time, you could, if he was Jewish, that would have been the only thing, and a woman. I mean, that would be the only two things he wasn't to make him sort of, different from what was going on there. So I sort of like to find out that stuff. At any rate, the Washingtonians were a group that was dedicated to the cause of sobriety and recovery from alcoholism. They were huge. To duplicate the population of the Washingtonians, we are 2 million members in the United States as it exists right now. In ratio, for us to duplicate the rank and file of the Washingtonians, we would have to have 10 million, and we're 2 million globally. We would have to have 10 million members of AA just in the United States to duplicate how big they were at that time. They no longer exist. Virtually no one knows about them. As a matter of fact, the only people, it seems, that really know about them are people in AA who have studied them as a cautionary tale because they had no traditions. And they started getting into money, property, and prestige. They started getting into utilizing the success that they were experiencing in the cause of alcoholism and parlaying it into politics, into other issues, outside issues. And it's a really good thing for us to know. In the first 10 years of my sobriety, I was not involved in the traditions. And I was not involved, and that's not what I'm going to be talking about this weekend. I'm going to be talking about the steps. But I will tell you that in the first 10 years, I'm just about embarrassed to tell you how uninvolved I was from the traditions. I was, in fact, the head trustee of one of the biggest AA clubhouses in the world, and I had no functioning knowledge of the 12 traditions. Really crazy. And I've been, because of a change in sponsorship and a change in some stuff I was doing, 5 years ago I got involved in the traditions, and I just can't tell you how much it's enhanced my enjoyment, my pleasure, my involvement in the program, my appreciation of the steps, and my functioning in the program. It's made just a huge world of difference. And it's unavoidable, if you're going to study the history of the steps, you have to go back to the Washingtonians, you have to see how this organization didn't work, and then what happened in AA, and how from sticking to our singleness of purpose, the steps worked, they became applied just to the prospect of getting and staying sober. The Oxford group was a group called Moral Rearmament, and it eventually became nicknamed the Oxford group. And it was started by a guy named Buchanan, or he certainly became the administrator of it. And it was around in the 20s and 30s. And this is the group that Roland Hazard became a member of. Roland Hazard was the guy who Carl Jung told that there was no hope for him. He came back, he became a member of the Oxford group, and then he 12-stepped a guy named Ebby Thatcher. Ebby Thatcher then 12-stepped Bill Wilson. And when they became involved in the Oxford group basically did exactly the same thing that the Washingtonians did. Frank Buchanan, as a matter of fact, also went as far as trying to contact Adolf Hitler to form a relationship with him, which really annoyed a lot of people, because he really felt that the teachings of the Oxford group could really save the world. And they got into money, property, and prestige too. And you know what? The Oxford group, in the main, doesn't exist. It doesn't. People don't know about it. The only people that seem to know about it or care about it are the people in AA, because we're grateful to them for having helped start AA. And again, they're a cautionary tale. They're a cautionary tale. And all of those principles about it being about alcoholism, about it not being about other issues, about it not being about money, property, and prestige, are all the value, if applied properly, with the 12 steps. The Oxford group had something called the Four Absolutes, which were the guiding principles which they strove to attain. And that was absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. This is what Bill Wilson ultimately wrote about the Four Absolutes. Quote Bill, "The principles of honesty, purity, and unselfishness and love are as much a goal of AA members and are as much practiced by them as by any other group of people. Yet we found that when the word absolute was put in front of these attributes, they either turned people away by the hundreds or gave a temporary spiritual inflation resulting in collapse. The average alcoholic just couldn't stand the pace and got nowhere." And how true. How true. It was amazing. It's amazing to see the difference between the original version of Chapter 5 and the comparison we did last night. How the word "you" was used over and over and over again. You're going to do this, your program, you, instead of what we wound up with, which was we, us. And I want to tell you, anytime anybody gets up to a podium and says, you this, you that, you got to do the, I close up like a clam. I go, no, you. No, you. But that's the Bronx in me coming out. When Bill talks about, on page 159 of AA Comes of Age, I just want to go over a little of the material I talked about last night just to get his description of it. So the job went, until we reached the now famous chapter 5. This is about the writing of the book. Up to that time, I had done my own story and had drafted 3 more chapters with the titles, There is a Solution, More About Alcoholism and We Agnostics. It was now realized that we had enough background and window dressing material, and that at this point we would have to tell how our program of recovery from alcoholism really worked. The backbone of the book would have to be fitted in right here. The problem had secretly worried the life out of me. I had never written anything before, and neither had any other member of the New York group. Progress on the book had been too slow for several of the stock subscribers. Right? And they had slacked off in their contributions. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. He's such a promoter. It's just unbelievable. The hassling over the 4 chapters already finished had really been terrific. I was exhausted. On many a day, I felt like throwing the book out of the window. I was in this anything but spiritual mood on the night when the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous were written. I was sore and tired clear through. I lay in bed with a pencil in hand, a tablet of scratch paper. I could not get off my mind on the job, much less put my heart to it. And here was one of those things that had to be done. It had to be done. And how many times have all of us heard at meetings, I had to pick up that 1,000-pound pencil. I had to sit down and write. I didn't want to do it. This is like the quintessential didn't want to do it. I didn't want to write the 12 steps. But here was one of those things that had to be done. Slowly my mind came into some kind of focus. Since Ebby's visit to me on the fall of 1934, we had gradually evolved what we had called the word of mouth program. Most of the basic ideas had come from the Oxford group, William James, who wrote The Variety of Spiritual Experience, and Dr. Silkworth, because Dr. Silkworth introduced Bill to the notion of the disease concept, and then Bill, hysterically enough, had to bring the concept of disease to a doctor, Dr. Bob. Though subject to considerable variation, it all boiled down to a pretty consistent procedure of the 6 steps. And here are the 6 steps. 1, we admitted we were licked, that we were powerless over alcohol. 2, we made a moral inventory of our defects or sins. Boy, aren't you glad they got that word out. 3, we confessed or shared our shortcomings with another person in confidence. 4, we made restitution to all those we had harmed by our drinking. 5, we tried to help other alcoholics with no thought of reward in money or prestige. And 6, we prayed to whatever God we thought there was for power to practice these principles. That was the substance of what, by the fall of 38, we were telling newcomers. Several other of the Oxford group ideas and attitudes had been rejected. So, Bill sits down, and he does this piece of writing he really does not want to do. And he gets it done. And he finishes it. And at that moment, a couple of late callers arrived. One of them was one of his friends named Howard A. With him was a newcomer, barely dry 3 months. I was greatly pleased with what I had written. And I read them the new version of the program, now called the 12 Steps. Howard and his friend reacted violently. Why 12 steps? They demanded. And then, you got too much God in the steps. It's going to scare people away. And then they said, what do you mean by getting those drunks down on their knees when they ask to have their shortcomings removed? And then they said, who wants all their shortcomings removed anyway? So like this image of Bill Wilson coming down from a mountain with 2 tablets, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. He came down to whining. He came down to guys going, what? I don't like 12, why 12? I get on my knees. And the fact that a new guy was just hocking him. I love it. It's perfect. It's perfect AA. In the other world, in the movie world, he would have come down, I've got the 12 steps, and sweep into a room with a huge mahogany table, and the men would, nod, they would, nah, not 12. And then as he saw my uneasiness, Howard added, well, and there here, Howard becomes a people pleaser. He says, well, some of the stuff does sound pretty good after all. But Bill, you got to tone it down. It's too stiff. The average alcoholic just won't buy it. They buy it the way it stands. And then they got it out to the groups, and they started taking a look at it together. And as we heard last night, started making those adjustments, which I believe were vital. I think that if Bill Wilson had, when people say Bill really wrote the book, well, you know what? He didn't really write the book. Because without the changes that we saw last night, I don't think it flies. I don't think AA works that way. For you and you. I don't think, it doesn't work for me, I'll tell you that. You know, so, yes, Bill wrote the book, but you know he didn't. You know he didn't. My favorite thing is the fact that he wrote the chapter to the wives. I just love that. And when Lois found out that he was going to be writing it, she sat and wept, which was, at any rate. Another thing that I really adore is that the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was, you know, I guess we're talking about the fall of 38, AA dates from 35, and AA dates from the day that Dr. Bob worked his 9th step. That's the day that Alcoholics Anonymous started. He got sober for a period of time. He went to a doctor's convention, came back just completely kablooey, you know. And one thing in the literature, in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, which I really love, is it talks about the person who I believe is the real hero, the real guy who gave more for the founding of AA than anybody. Because Dr. Bob was a proctologist, and he had to do surgery on a guy. And he came back off this last bender. He then worked his 9th step. He made his rounds to all the people and admitted his wrongs and made amends. He came back shaking, but he finally did the thing that he would not do. He would not do that. He was convinced that he would jeopardize his only vestige of being able to make a living. Of course, all these people knew he was a drunk, you know. And then Bill had to detox him and get him in some condition for a couple of days hence when he'd have to perform the surgery. And in the literature, it says, so we got him together and we sent him in to do the surgery, and I gave him one more beer and a goofball. And sent him in to do this. Now, I want to tell you, the guy who gave more for AA than anyone was the guy on that table that morning. Right? That's the hero of Alcoholics Anonymous. Is that guy that's just about to hear up proctoscope, okay? With this guy going, doctor walks in. Oh, it's not shaking. Good. I can do this. One beer and a goofball. Where's Larry M. Parker when you need him? It says in the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth says something that fascinated me and made me very curious for a long time. He says that we long, when he talks about the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous works, and by the way, if you ever get a chance to take a look at a copy of the first edition of AA, of the Big Book of AA, one thing that I love is, you know where it's signed Dr. Silkworth, where he gives a little letter in the front of the doctor's opinion? Well, in the original printing of the Big Book, it's not signed. It says Dr. Anonymous. He was hedging his bet. He wanted to see, you know what I mean? And it's really funny. It says signed, no one. And the letter says you can absolutely trust anything they say. Signed, nobody. Now, I understand. And he signed, I don't even think he ever signed any of either the later printings. I'd be curious to check that out, but certainly in the first printings of the first edition, his name's not in there. Now, I understand he worked for Town Hospital. He would not only be jeopardizing himself, but he would perhaps be putting his institution in some degree of jeopardy. That's all fine and well. The fact is that he was hedging his bet, and he wasn't quite ready to sign the document. But he says in the doctor's opinion, we long imagine that some form of moral psychology, because he talks about the problems with heavy drinkers that are solvable through psychological treatment. We all know that Alcoholics Anonymous has absolutely no monopoly on recovery from alcoholism. People do it all sorts of different ways. But he says, we long imagine there's some form of moral psychology, and I never understood what that meant until I stuck around long enough and did enough of the work to understand something that I mentioned last night, that in therapy you receive understanding, and in Alcoholics Anonymous you receive forgiveness. I never received forgiveness in therapy. The conceit in therapy, and I don't say conceit pejoratively because it's a process that really works for a lot of people and has worked for me at times, is to examine something until it unravels. To examine, let's say for our purposes for this retreat, let's define neurosis. Everybody's heard, you're neurotic. It's probably been you've probably been at the business end of that. You're so neurotic, you're neurotic. Well, what does neurotic mean? Neurotic, let's say for our purposes, means an unsatisfying resolution for anxiety. Everyone's going to have anxiety. Don't tell me that, I mean, unless you're just brain dead, St. Francis, have taken a few too many to the melon, you're going to have anxiety about stuff. Now, it is typical of alcoholic behavior to have solutions that are worse than your problems. All right? That's typical. My solutions were so much worse than most of my problems. Or my solutions were stalling techniques to waylay the resolution for an anxiety to have an opportunity for more anxiety. So, let's say neurosis are unpleasant, unsatisfying, unsoothing resolutions for anxiety. And let's say I believe the purpose of the steps is to come up with what are, in the long run, they might be difficult at first, soothing resolutions for anxiety. Something that will make me more, well, how many times have we heard it? More comfortable in my skin. More able to reach out and touch other people. More useful to God. What a great thing. Now, I never received that from therapy. I'll tell you why. I would resolve things, but my alcoholism would create so much more fury that I never caught up. I never caught up. Sometimes I'd break even. That was a good day. But above and beyond that, I could rarely catch up because I'd be resolving anxiety, creating anxiety at such an insane level because of the alcoholic behavior. So that is moral psychology. Moral psychology is what we do in AA through the steps. We examine, and once we examine, uncover, discover, and then we're told to discard. So here in therapy, I uncovered, discovered, and paid, basically. And again, I'm not making fun of therapy because I found it to be very useful, but I uncovered, discovered, but then had no way to resolve what I was doing. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, I uncovered, discovered, and then have a moral application to do something with it. To use it in my dark past in God's hands, I can help others avert death and misery. So there's a moral application for the psychological discovery. That's what moral psychology is. That's what the 12 steps are for me. Give me a second to catch up with myself. I do believe that there's a tendency, and there has been a tendency in me at times, as I said last night when I was talking about that tape that Bill made, to iconize the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for me, that's really antithetical to the whole spirit of the way the book was written. I will tell you that in all the work I've done in AA, I've come up with no way to upgrade it. There's no like Big Book 3.1 or anything like that. I personally am very, very pleased that GSO made a decision to not touch the basic text of the first 64 pages of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the 4th edition, which will be coming out, which is kind of a strange idea, it's the first edition of the Big Book to be published without one of our founders alive, which is an interesting endeavor. They have, again, endeavored to not mess with it, because despite the problems with political correctness, despite the problems with statements about gender, about all of this stuff, besides the PC stuff, the basic spiritual principles are, as far as I can see, rock solid and stuff that's not only worked for us, but has given birth to dozens of other 12-step programs that work. Some years ago, this guy, Jay, was up at a recovery home, and he called his brother, and he said to his brother, look, I've heard a tape of a guy up here. It's this guy, Scott Redman, and this guy can save my life. I know it. I've heard his story. It's the same story as me, and I don't know how in God's name I'm going to get a hold of this guy, but I am telling you, if I get a hold of this guy, I know I'll be okay. And his brother said, well, you're a moron. Scott Redman's been my sponsor for 10 years. You've eaten dinner with him about a dozen times. You stood next to him at my wedding. You might have slept with him. I don't know. And you have the mind of a chicklet, and that's what's going on. So you guys know how long I was able to keep this guy sober? Exactly not 1 single second. Which helped me. It didn't help. Didn't help. And this guy was extremely powerful, multi-millionaire, and really one of the sweetest guys. Me and a buddy were talking before the meeting about a chronic slipper we know who's just a sweetheart, just a great guy. And he's dying. He's dying from alcoholism. And this guy, just a sweetheart, great guy, dying from alcoholism, and had resources that I could never even dream of having. He had friends who sequestered him on their own private island in the Caribbean to keep him sober for a while. Didn't drink the entire time he was there until he got off. Then he drank. I took him down to the Laguna to meet my sponsor, and he got 12-step by, it's like 5 circuit speakers. Paul O, John Ackerlin, Cliff Roach, me, we all 12-stepped him, and I think he drank while he was talking to us. And I called my sponsor and called all the guys in the circle and go, you sent him reeling to a bar. I wanted to make sure they knew how powerful they were, about as powerful as I was. And one day, this guy calls me up and he goes, I got it, man, I got it. Come over to my house. You got to see this. I got it. And what he had was, there's a couple of hundred of the original first printings, big book, big red cover, but the biggie. A couple of $100, a couple of 100 copies left. They can go for as much as 10 G's now, or more. And he had bought one. I said, I got it. Never going to drink again. I got it. I opened up, I looked at it, I said, it looks like it hasn't been touched. I mean, it's perfect. He says, that's right. I said, so you got the loser book. You got the loser book that's been handed down from loser to loser for 65 years. And now you've got it. Kind of like being voted most attractive man on your cell block, you know? Sort of like, you know, it's an honor, but I don't know if I want to pick up the trophy, you know? He went, fuck you! And he sold it for an 8-ball the next time he went out. And a year ago, November 16th, the pain got so bad. The pain got so bad for this guy, he tied his throat to something on the side, couldn't even hang himself. And just sat down and killed himself and choked himself to death. Because the pain was so unbearable. So unbearable. The component of this illness, which snatches us away from being helped by any doctor, by the clergy, by anybody, this soul sickness, this cancer of the soul, this spiritual tapeworm that ate me up from the inside and left me hollow and insane and alone, and I saw it happen to the guy. A beautiful cat. I saw it happen to him, we all stood by, and we watched him with all these resources, the resources of millions and millions of dollars that he got to bear. And he didn't even throw a rope over a beam. He just tied himself to something on a wall and sat down. He wanted to die. He wanted the noise to stop. And you know, before I talked about your head hitting the pillow and it becoming a rotisserie, and I want to tell you, in 18 years of psychotherapy and everything that I ever did, the only thing that has ever taken the edge of that noise and offered me some peace have been the 12 steps of AA. Nothing else has ever done it. Yeah, I might have gotten a respite here or there, but nothing else has turned it off except for that thing. It took the power that runs the universe, you know. And I know God can keep Saturn on its axis, but I'm sure he won't be able to handle your problems. Or mine for that matter. I was talking with some guys before the meeting. We were talking about having no problem admitting that we were a mess. I never had a problem with the first half of the first step. Yeah, I'm a drunk, I'm a junkie, I'm a drunk, I'm a junkie. So what? I really had I didn't have much of a problem dealing with that. My life's unmanageable, that was not available to me. I didn't quite get that at all. There are no written instructions on how to take the first 2 steps in the Big Book of AA. There are specific written instructions on how to take every other step in the Big Book of AA. There are no written specific instructions on how to take steps 1 and 2. Many guys do a lot of things about the first 2 steps. They do writing, they go through the 12 and 12, they have workbooks, and I think that all of that is great. I don't condemn any of it. I think it's anything that you can do to seek God is a great thing. But it is an end, not but, because but cancels out and end adds. And I always say that to the guys I sponsor. I tried saying it to my wife, and she said, "And leave me alone." It's like when I say to my wife, "I'm trying to be of service to you," and she said, "This is a marriage, not a coffee commitment." So there are certain words I don't use in my house. I might think them, but. Woo! Why, I asked myself, why were there no written instructions on how to take the first 2 steps in the Big Book of AA? The first 2 steps are contained in the 3 pertinent ideas that we read last night, and of course we all kind of got a kick out of right after the 3 pertinent ideas in the original manuscript. It says, if you don't agree with these 3 pertinent ideas, reread the book up to this point or throw it away, which I just love. It basically says our description of the alcoholic, chapter the agnostic, personal adventures before and after. So if you've read 2 and 3 and 4, and you've read some of the adventures, now I don't know what they're talking about in terms of the adventures, before and after sobriety, or at the beginning and at the end of the book, I don't know and I don't much care, but it's before and after. I think it's probably both, but there are stories at the end of the book, and there are stories sprinkled through the first 4 chapters, in a terrific way. I love the way those stories are told about the guy who fell out of bed and said, "Who am I not to believe in God?" Whiskey in the milk, all of that great stuff. It says if you've read all of this stuff, it should point out 3 basic fundamental ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. God could and would if we were sought. Then we're at step 3. And I went, how did that happen? Did I miss 1 and 2? And it just basically says these are intuitive. I think that they were basically saying, and again, no indictment of anybody who does anything else, but I think what I think they were saying was, if you don't have some idea that something's wrong, then we'll be pissing into a gale force wind right now. I am not going to sit here and try to convince you that you're alcoholic. I'm not. So when I sit down with a guy, I get up to these 3 points, I make sure that he's done all of that reading, and I say, "Are you an alcoholic?" If he says no, I go, "Want to go to the movies?" Because I am not going to sit there and try to talk him into it. Is your life unmanageable? Well, I don't know. Well, can you do some controlled crack smoking? Or is it manageable, unmanageable? Can we just find a little place where it's unmanageable? Yeah, okay, fine. That's enough. The 12 and 12 says the hoop you're asked to jump through is really huge. And do you believe that a power greater than yourself could restore your sanity? Not would and should, but that it's possible. That it's possible to happen. Okay? If the step 12 says that having had a spiritual awakening is a result of these steps, if that's where the spiritual experience is going to it says it's going to happen, it doesn't say the spiritual experience is going to happen in step 2. It says, is it possible? I'm not saying, can this happen? Should this happen? Can I make an appointment for it to happen? Do you believe that it's possible? I don't know. Well, do you think that if you stuck around AA long enough that something could change? If you heard enough stories to see a demonstration how it's worked in other guys' lives? Okay, fine. Okay, fine, then let's go. Let's hit the floor running. Now, in step 2, if you go back to there is a solution. On page 24, right after that incredible list of things we say to ourselves. It won't burn me now, so this time, so here we go. For God's sake, how did I ever get started again? I'll stop after the 6th drink, my personal favorite. Or what's the use anyway? A very popular one. Then in the next paragraph, it says something incredibly important. It says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, let's say alcoholic tendencies is someone who is prone to that strange mental twist, or someone with the physical reaction where they actually physically cannot control and enjoy or moderate once they begin. Okay? When this thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human help. Okay, if he's placed himself beyond human help, then if we go to the beginning of the 4th chapter, it says Lack of power is our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. If we are beyond human help, just as it said in chapter 2, and that it has to be a power greater than ourselves. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to help you find a power that can solve your problem, because you are obviously incapable of doing that. And that's mirrored by the fact that you've just taken these first 2 steps. Now, the hoop that we're asked to jump through now is humongous, because it says on page 46 and 47 that you're going to have to find this power. That as soon as you admit the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit in the universe underlying the totality of things, we begin to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took certain steps. When my son Jesse was born, and I told you what an agonizing experience that was, around this time, my son Micah came to me. And he said to me, "Dad, is there anything such as God?" And I looked into the eyes of my little baby boy, perfect little boy, and I said, "No, there isn't." And I'll tell you, I had built my life predicated on this existential view of the world, which was based on art and self-determination, and I had rearranged my whole life to accommodate the walk to the drink, and that world could not hold, it couldn't contain a God. It could not. To him, in essence, you know what? When it's dark at night, you're scared and you're all alone? Tough, because that's all there is. I mean, that's really what I said to him. Which, if you read the rest of the 4th chapter, it puts forward the notion that I was doing something completely antithetical to what I thought I was doing. What I thought I was giving him was the real deal. I don't think he's too young, let's start now. Let me give you the real deal so you don't get played like a sap and a sucker. So you get the real existential party line, and you don't have to be one of these goofballs who has to lean back on this fallacious view of the world. What I was doing was completely the opposite. What the 4th chapter puts forward is the notion that what I was in fact sharing with him was the weakest, most pathetic, mushiest thinking of all. That I was staring in the face of all this immutable law, of all of these binding spiritual factions, physical, mathematical principles that bind the universe, and saying, no, this is just a pointless cipher, wandering, floating freely in the universe. To really, really take that notion and believe in it, you have got to just be la 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 la. You have got to be, man, you got to be shutting out most of what we know about the world. But that's how spiritually sick I was. And here we go in our book. Now, I thought to have God, I had to speak Hebrew, I had to get my ass kicked a lot, I had to do all this stuff. And what does our book say? It's so beautiful on page 47. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe? Am I even just willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? If you can answer yes, we don't say, okay, write a check. We don't say, prepare for your hazing. We don't say, it says, as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is even willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on his way. Wow. What a beautiful thing. Beautiful, beautiful thing. So, I want to read an excerpt from the 12 and 12 about step 1 and about the first 2 steps. It says on the last page of the description of step 1, why all this insistence that every AA must hit bottom first? The answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice the AA program unless they have hit a bottom. For practicing AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can dream of taking. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant? Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution for harm done? Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? No, the average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for this prospect unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive. And that's exactly what Bill told the foundation. It's what I talked briefly about last night. You don't have to make rules. They have alcoholism. And alcoholism will school them. It will take them to task. It will school them. This whole notion of slipping and drinking and dying will do for them what no code of behavior is going to be able to do for them. And then on the first page of the description of step 3, it says something very interesting. It says, in the first 2 steps, we were engaged in reflection. We saw that we were powerless over alcohol, but we also perceived that faith of some kind is only in AA itself. If only in AA itself is possible to anyone. These conclusions did not require action, they required only acceptance. So what he's basically saying is that the first two steps require some degree of faith, no matter how fundamental it is, and acceptance. They don't really require action. That I have to have some faith that things are going to change in step two, and I have to accept the fact that I'm an alcoholic and my life is unmanageable on some level. And then into step three and into action. And what I'd like to do right now is take a 5-minute break and then come back and begin step three. We've been at it for over 45 minutes. Okay, so let's break for 5 minutes. Alcoholic. God. Will everybody please join me in the serenity prayer? God.
Grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Let's take a moment of silent meditation. If everybody in the room wants to take a minute and just meditate on when they hit their bottom, when they experience steps 1 and 2. We're going to move on to step 3 right now, and step 3 is a pretty serious notion, and whenever I think about taking step 3, I have to remember to not take myself too seriously, which is pretty much the hallmark of Alcoholics Anonymous, in a lot of ways. And I heard people in AA, I heard an old-timer once say that the most spiritual I will ever get is when I stick my hand out to a newcomer. Alcoholics Anonymous, in my estimation and in my personal experience, is not some spiritual pursuit where, again, I wind up alone. It's not some self-help group where I stop overeating, I stop touching myself, I stop touching others, I stop doing all this stuff, I'm fine, I'm perfect. This notion that I'm going to that it is self-help, that somehow I'm going to be everything I really want to be or think I should be, for me is absolutely the wrong approach to the spiritual principles embodied in the 12 steps. Now, if I overcome some problems in sobriety, then I have a grand opportunity to actually mirror the 3rd step prayer, which we'll all take together in a few minutes. It says, take away my difficulties, the victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. So it's a grand thing for me to overcome a lot, and I came in AA with a lot of personal problems. I still have a lot of personal problems. I'm a troubled individual. I have a lot of problems. I always have had a lot of problems. And if I get to overcome some of those problems, I get to look in the eyes of a man and say, yes, this thing is for you too. And the adverse of that is, I can also say to a man, you know what, I have this problem, and I still have this problem, and I still don't drink. I still don't drink. So maybe take away my difficulties is that I still do this one thing, which is troubling to me, but I'm on deck. I'm in the game. I'm working the steps, and I don't drink anyway. I have this friend named Kathy who I just adore. She's if you, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not telling you to do this, and this isn't direction, I will just tell you this. My life has been so enriched by finding out about Al-Anon. And I don't mean joining Al-Anon. I'm not a member. But I've listened to Al-Anon speakers. I've gotten Al-Anon tapes. I have read a little Al-Anon literature. I have become acquainted with this other program. And if nothing else, it's helped me in my 12-step work. I'm able to tell new guys what's available there for their families. It's an extremely helpful thing. And I have gotten some of my greatest spiritual gifts from Al-Anon speakers. And one of them is a lady named Kathy from Cincinnati. And she has 4 sons. All of them are drunks. And this cop calls me and says, we have your son down here, and he won't tell us his name because he says it violates his First Amendment rights. At any rate, and she said, well, you got me. I have 4 sons, and all of them are very concerned about the First Amendment rights, so I don't know. I don't know which one it is. But along the lines of not taking yourself too seriously, she gets called down to school. Her kid's been caught using drugs, and she's in the principal's office. The principal tells her what's going to happen. She goes outside, and she takes her kid, one of her 4 sons, aside and says, look, Steve, I'm going to be with you. I'm just going to stick with you through this. Stephen, I'm telling you right now, we're going to overcome this. I'm going to get you help, and it's going to be okay. Okay, Stevie. And the kid said, okay, Mom, but I'm Robert. And we had reached step 3 mysteriously after taking a look at the first 3 propositions in the book, and then there's a 3.5-page section on, actually it's a 2.5-page section on step 3 in the big book of AA. Step 3 is pretty much, I always see the steps sort of as having 2 huge spiritual pivots, 3 and 6 and 7 for me being the sort of the linchpins that everything else sort of spins around. And these first 2 steps, which require some degree, sort of a primitive amount of faith at first and some acceptance, sort of step 3 spins us off into the realm of action. And in what they do, because they beat you, they beat us in this book in this loving way. You know, you know, if you're new and you want to read about what we're going to do to you, you can read it. Take a look at the sadistic 7th chapter of the big book of AA. You know, it basically says, get a guy while he's down. Get him while he's down, like he's coming off a bender and his face looks like a clenched fist and he's just destroyed, pounded to crap. That's the time to go talk to him. Talk to him and heap upon him evidence as to the hopelessness of his situation. But it's even worse than that. Before they tell you to do that, they say, talk to him, get him to laugh with you, get him to cry with you, get him to identify. Then heap upon him as to the evidence of the hopelessness of his situation. It's just totally sadistic, you know? And we're going to tell you we're going to do it, and then we're going to do it anyway. You know, it's common knowledge. It's out there, you know, it's on the common drive. So everybody's privy to it. And as typical of that, because they pounded the crap out of us in the first 2 chapters, and then in the 4th chapter they've delivered the bad news. The bad news, the worst news I ever heard is this issue that you thought you had neatly evaded, this issue about a higher power, this issue about spirituality, this issue about all of that stuff that you thought you had neatly evaded, that is in fact going to be your only hope for survival. Really? Let me see if I can get off more than one shot before I drop. And after they deliver that horrifying news, then they deliver us, as Bill said, then he had to sit down and he had to write it. He had to write it. Pick up the 1,000-pound pencil and write it. And after they take us through the steps, they then have this 2.5-page section, which is brutal. It's this brutal, I felt it was an indictment. It's really not an indictment. It's unfortunately an incredibly adept description of the psychological mindset of the alcoholic. 2 of the single best descriptions of the mindset of the alcoholic I have ever heard in my life are not in the big book of AA. I'll tell you where they come from. One was in the description of Ted Bundy. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ted Bundy was a serial murderer who liked to kill and bite women. And killed a lot of people. And in this thing they did on him, the shrinks, the detectives, and the DAs are sitting around and they are talking about how bizarre this guy is, because he would represent himself in court. And they were admitting that they liked him. They were admitting he was so compelling. He was so effective in court. And these guys who knew what this guy did, they knew it. Or even some of them were going, kind of like the guy. And they're going, why? And they're like having this roundtable discussion of why. And one of the shrinks summed it up for me, and unfortunately summed up alcoholism. He said, don't you understand that when he steps, because the shrink is saying he's not lying to us. He's not lying. He said, don't you understand, when he steps in that courtroom, the only thing that is real to him, the only thing that is palpable to him is his own pain. Nothing else exists. And it's not sentimental, it's not melodramatic, it's not a lie. The only thing that exists for him is his own pain. And I went, bingo. Unfortunately, bingo. I am Ted Bundy. Because when I am in that psychological state, and I did those things to my wife, to my kids, to my employers, and to myself, sometimes I felt the incredible remorse. That was a resentment against myself. But many, many times, the only thing that was real and palpable that allowed me to turn those people into papier-mâché figures or into non-existent beings was the importance, the urgency, and the agony of my own pain. The other description of alcoholism, which, again, we're at this pivotal point where it gets described in the description of step 3, which I heard came from a Kurt Vonnegut description of Nazis. And he was explaining how the Nazi mind worked. He was explaining why seemingly normal people, because everybody wasn't Hitler in Nazi Germany, who killed 25 million people, you know, from Germany to Russia, back and forth. He was describing how bakers, how candlestick makers, how rank and file people were able to, they weren't all these monsters. There's a wonderful book by Hannah Arendt called The Banality of Evil, where she talks about the fact that most of the people who do these things are not these big, demonic, dramatic figures. They're pencil pushers. They're bureaucrats. They're rank and file people. And Vonnegut summed it up in a way that was so meaningful in terms of alcoholism, it made me sick. He said, don't you understand that the Nazi mind, and I'll just say the alcoholic mind, is like the most perfectly tuned clock that keeps the most precise time in the universe for 1 minute and then skips a century. That when it works, it is rhapsodic, it is perfect, it is beautiful. And when it doesn't work, it leaves gaps large enough to move an entire culture through. So the lack of reason, the lack of moral application is excused and pardoned by the fact that when it functions so damn well and seems so incredibly normal. How many times have we heard people say, except for the drinking, he seems to be a pretty darn good guy, but he has a beer and goes out for a pizza and winds up in Leavenworth for some bizarre reason. So it wasn't good news for me that I heard descriptions of alcoholism in those two things. But you know what? It made me kind of feel good. There's a lot of stuff in the literature about Bill Wilson forming relationships with people in prison who had been accused of some pretty serious crimes. And again, Bill was able to form these relationships because he had the gift of forgiveness to pass on. And that gift was something that he found in Alcoholics Anonymous. So in the description of step 3, we had the description of self-will on page 60, and then a terrifying thing for me on page 61, where it talks about what kind of bully I am. Now, in the main, it talks about he may be quite virtuous, kind, considerate, patient, generous, self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. All right? Now, that made a tremendous amount of sense to me because, you see, I don't know how to fight. I didn't know how to fight in my marriage. Never knew how to fight. I scream. I scream till you shut up, or I cry till you shut up. I call it the tyranny of helplessness. And I like to loom. I'm a good loomer. I'm a big guy. I like to loom with a light behind me, so she's in a shadow. I like that. It's like a total eclipse of the Jew. You know, I like that. Right? Now, if I can work a scream, a cry, and a loom into one fight, that's a trifecta. That's a hat trick. Doesn't get a lot better than that. Don't know how to fight. Don't know how to fight. Don't even know how to clean the house. I don't know how to clean the house. A grown man ought to clean the house. That's something a grown man would do. But I never feel like a grown man. Why? Because I don't act like one. I think somewhere in the back of my head that a certain amount of housework should equal a certain amount of sex. That there should be like conversion tables on the back of cleaning products than housework. That's right. Don't know how to fight, don't know how to clean, don't know how to be a man, don't know how to be in the world, don't know how to live one day at a time, don't know how to be it. Right in the middle of the clap, guy in AA says, I love when he says it, I want to be right here, right in the middle of the clap. Right here, right now, right today. What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. So when they said this ate my lunch so terribly because I was a really nice guy. I really was. I was a sterling human being. Then if you didn't do what I wanted you to do, then you should die in a flaming car crash. But out of the gate, I'm a hell of a nice guy. So they ate my lunch here. And then, of course, I'd be quite virtuous and loving until you didn't do what I wanted to do, and then I would mutate into the other me. And then it says, or we might be egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. And then it says something that the big book is very good at. It always moderates. It says, but quite often we will do both things, and that's certainly what I found myself doing. But it was all about having it my way. It was all about getting it my way eventually, even though that was not my intention at first, because not only am I ill-intended at times, I am also, which is even more confusing for someone growing up in an alcoholic home, I was quite often telling the truth at first, over here. By the time I got to the drink, it wound up being a lie. But I was quite often telling the truth. I was going to buy a bike over here. Didn't wind up over here. How much worse for the kid if you're just an idiot and just lying through your teeth? Some children are able to separate that from reality and know it. But when the alcoholic, because he's so crippled by self-delusion, doesn't know it, it's so injurious and so confusing for everyone involved. Isn't he the victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world only if he manages well? I love this so much. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. I'm wrong, but you're wronger. Now, I'm wrong and you're wronger. I should have had that in needlepoint on a pillow in my house. I mean, if we could go, I was always trying to get a quantity of wrong. What's the quantity of wrong? I'm wrong, okay, but where do I stand on the field of wrong? Where are we here, okay? There was no personal responsibility. There was no personal, it was all relative to you. Now, if you don't think you're wrong, we're in for a long talk, because I know that I'm going to be able to come up with something. You see, my way of working on a relationship is to talk to you until you change your mind. That's my idea of working on a relationship, is to talk to you until your eyes roll back in your head and you keel over, and on the way over you go, oh, okay, and you're down. Right? That's the Scott Redman Couples Workshop right there, 45 seconds, you got all the tools you need. And what it is it's a war of attrition. You just starve them out. Don't let him pee and don't let him eat. Just keep talking. If you loved me, you wouldn't have to go to the bathroom. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. We've got to remember that this book was written in 1937 and 1939. Egocentric was a happening term in those days, and then, on page 62, the second paragraph, for me, the most astute, most bone-chilling description of the savage mindset of the uncivilized alcoholic, and here it is. To me, I've never heard anything that even comes close to rivaling it. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven is not nudged or influenced. Driven implies under the lash of, in slavery to. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. I don't know if that's 100 of each or 25 of each, and that equals 100. But frankly, I don't give a crap. It's a lot. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably means without variation, every time, without any exception whatsoever, invariably find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Horrible. Horrible. What a horrible place to live. What a horrible existence. I want to point out something that I'm going to talk at greater length as the time goes on. Now, you're telling me that I have always placed myself in a position to be hurt. Now, this is preemptive to describing how I get hurt. How I get hurt is the spiritual sickness of resentment, fear, and sexual misconduct, okay? Because how My aunt pinned my arms to my side so that my cousin could hit me when I was a little kid. How would I place myself in a position to be hurt? I didn't. It's inexcusable. It's not okay. Not okay to do that to a little boy. I don't give a crap if the kid was a pain in the ass. To render a little boy helpless so he can be struck, nothing good about it. I can't possibly have placed myself in a position to be hurt. I resented the Nazis for slaughtering 6 million Jews. How did I place myself in a position to be hurt? I didn't. I didn't understand the difference between the event and the resentment. Because the event is the event. The event was not my fault. Is the resentment. Every time, without variation, with no exception, otherwise I can't get rid of it. And until I separated the event from the resentment, I was dead. I was a dead man. There's no way out. What am I going to do? No matter how I dance around this, I'm lying if I tell you my aunt was right. But I didn't get that AA doesn't say my aunt's right. AA says my aunt's sick, and until I can appreciate her illness, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And we'll talk about that more as the day goes on, because it is, for me, the big turning point, the big pivotal point. How can I accept responsibility without accepting blame for the things that I am blameless for? Now, there are some things I am blameful for. There's no question about it. But those things, the things that concern bigotry, the things that concern institutionalized racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, child abuse, these things I not only was I unwilling to take a blame for, AA never told me I had to, but I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. So, further on down that page, it says, so our troubles we think were basically of our own making. This is this selfishness is the thing that's going to kill me, and there's only one way out. God makes this possible. And then at the bottom of the page, and this is kind of interesting. There often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. What a terrible indictment of the way I lived. Because I talked a lot of long shit, you know. I had a lot of very strong political beliefs. I never gave a penny to a political candidate or a political movement until I became a responsible man. I just talked a lot of long crap. You can't eat into your dope bucks to... I always thought you should get like dope bucks, like coins at Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. There should be dope. One of my fantasies. And... neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. This is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. How do I quit playing God? Well, first of all, for me, I can't be in AA bossing people around and telling them what to do and beating up sponsees and yelling and screaming at people and expect that I'll have stopped playing God. I can't do it. I can't decide. So how I started this retreat, I can't possibly get up here and tell you what you should be doing and expect to experience the gift of step 3. They can't exist. It's like Superman and Clark Kent. You can't find them in the same room at the same time. I can't be bullying people and expect grace to enter my life and feel that I'm really participating in this thing and not trying to run it. That's just me. And I've made a lot of mistakes. And I've tried to do it in a lot of different ways. And I've tried to just hook a little condition on a certain help I'd give at a certain time. A little bit, sneak it in a little bit. And I've suffered terribly for it. Most good ideas are simple. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we passed to freedom. When we sincerely took such a position that God was going to be the father, we were going to be the kid. He was going to lead. We were going to be his agents. We were going to move over. You know, how many times have we heard that? Just move over, let him drive. God doesn't move, he doesn't drive parked cars. If you're hungry, don't lock yourself in a closet and wait for him to stick a hot dog through the keyhole. You got to get out there. You got to pull that car out onto the road and stop doing the same thing and expecting the same results. And here in step 3, in this prayer, in this treatment, we find this huge opportunity for action. Some of you have been around, I'm sure have heard this. I'll tell this for the new guys. It's one of my absolutely favorite descriptions of the disease of alcoholism. This guy told me when I was really young in sobriety, he said if a normal person, a psychotic, and an alcoholic all walk through a door, and all of them get hit flush in the face by a 2x4, The normal person will never walk through again. The psychotic will walk through a couple of more times, get whacked, and stop. The alcoholic will walk through every day, get whacked in the face, will do it day after day after day, and then if one day he walks through and does not get whacked, he'll go, I can wait. Probably had to get coffee, he'll come back, he'll whack me, and I'll move on with the business of life. And what we're asked to do in step 3 is to really stop walking through the door. And it's supported by this notion that the only thing that is going to get me to stop walking through the door is actually the power that runs the universe. My friend Cliff talks about these being, he says this so beautifully, he says, these are the formal articles of surrender. That this is the place where he felt the touch of the Master's hand. And I love his description of that. We were now at step 3. And if all of you, those of you who know it, take the third step with me. We'll say the third step prayer now. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Now, it says here we thought well before taking this step that we were sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. I'm not going to go out and buy a robe right now, but I'm abandoning myself to the best of my ability. My sponsor did something very beautiful for me when he first took me through this step. He asked me over to his house. He had made sure I'd done some reading from the Big Book of AA. And he read chapter 5 to me, and on the way through, he took me to the first 3 pertinent ideas, and he asked me those questions. I said yes, otherwise we would have gone to a movie. And he read up to step 3, and then he said, would you like to make a decision now? Just make a decision to turn your will in your life. And I went, well, yeah, I mean, it just seems so, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm here, in AA. Sure. And he said, well, let's get on our knees. And I said, this is unnecessary and embarrassing. I said that to myself. And I got on my knees, and he opened his book, and I didn't know the prayer, and he read the prayer with me, and I thought to myself, gee, shouldn't he know this already? I mean, did I get, what did I get? I get like a green guy here? I mean, what's the deal? Am I like his test case? And it took me years to realize what a loving thing he did. He didn't want to embarrass me. He didn't want me to have to read from the book alone. It was his little way of being, having some humility himself, and he read it, and he, followed along with his finger, and he read it with me. And it took me years to get, of course he knew it. He had been saying it every day for 3 years, So I get to do that with guys today. Maybe they're thinking that, maybe they're not. I don't know. Now, when I got sober, and I was sort of working the steps by myself before I asked my sponsor to work with me, I thought I had taken the first 3 steps, okay? I had admitted I'm powerless over alcohol. I can't stop drinking. That's alcoholism. That's a fatal illness. I admitted that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, that it was possible. Now, you don't need to be restored to sanity unless you're nuts, okay? And I had taken the 3rd step because I had, sort of parroted along and stuff. But it says right after this, that the 3rd step, what we just did, will have little permanent or lasting effect unless immediately followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that have been killing us. To the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 places in the Big Book of AA, 3 places, where it tells you when to do a 4th step. Here, we're at the point in the book we're up to, it says immediately after 3, if you expect 3 to have any lasting effect. So what I had done was, I had taken 1, I admitted I was dying, I admitted I was insane. Hello. How come I don't feel any better? Well, after a while, why should you feel better? There'll be some relief at first for taking that action, but if you don't do the rest of the work, 3 is going to kind of come and go. It's not going to be a real component to your life. That's what the book says. Not my opinion. It's in the book. And 1 and 2 is just the admission of insanity and death. So after a while, why am I not feeling any better? Why should you feel any better? And the 3 places that I know of where it tells you when to take a 3rd step, or kind of 4th step where it pins it down, it says here, immediately followed after the 3rd if you expect it to be around. In Bill's story, he describes doing the 4th step in his first couple of weeks of sobriety in the hospital. And my favorite section is in the 7th chapter of our book, there's this great thing. It says, give me 1 second to just pin this down. It says, this is about 12-step work. It says, sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. But this is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later on, he's likely to say you rushed him. Then on the next page it says, suppose you're now making your second visit to the man. Well, then go right ahead. So it says, don't get him writing the first time you meet him, basically. And it says the second time, feel free to. Now, again, this is part of the challenge that I put forward to you last night. A lot of guys in their AA families and in their AA tradition have a lot of different things. Some guys won't allow a guy or suggest the guy doesn't start until he's 6 months. A guy, I don't indict any of that. All I'm here is to share what my experience is, what's in the book, and all of this stuff works. It all works. Guys are getting sober all over the place. So if that's something that you or your AA family does, or it's the tradition in your group, excellent, most excellent. Some guys really feel that a guy needs to be clear. You know, one thing which I find a little disconcerting and I'm a little confused about is I've heard some guys say, I can't do the 4. The reason why I'm drinking is I didn't really do 3 before I did 4. And I'll tell you, that to me, I've seen guys really chase their tail over that. Because 3 is a decision. It's just a decision, because I say, Father, I'm yours, and he goes, well, yeah, I knew that. I'm God. I mean, thanks. Very nice gesture. Awfully big of you. But I'm God, and I kind of figured that out by myself. And when I say take this, and I tell him really what I'm giving him, which is my life, these defects of character, these resentments, these fears, this sexual misconduct. When I say take this, then my Father says, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Absolutely. I keep the electrons moving around all the atoms in the universe. I can do that. Then I form a relationship with my higher power. Then and what does it say? The last sentence of chapter 4, when I drew close to him, he revealed himself to me. God could and would if he were sought. We hear it parroted at a lot of meetings, but it's incredibly powerful statement that he can and he will if I seek him. Not if I find him, but in this process of seeking. And that's why I love Bill and those guys sitting up with them Ouija boards, eating vitamins, those wackos. I love those guys, man, you know. And so step 3 has been an interesting exercise. And for me, the first 3 steps in the big book of AA and the first 3 steps in our program, when I first took them, I took them on a very, compared to now, a very primitive level. And I have found that those steps for me have become bigger and richer, more enjoyable, more voluptuous kind of. The more I've done the rest of the work, it all trickles down and has made that bigger and bigger. How could I possibly, I mean, the guys who engineered this knew this. How can I possibly fully appreciate the second half of the first step until I wrote down what I had done and then had to make amends for it? You know, I mean, the first thing that I saw when I looked at step 8 is I said, no, not that money. Are you insane? I would not have taken that much money if I knew I had to give it back. No way. No way in heaven, I think. And my experience of these first 3 steps has been extraordinarily enriched and broadened by my work in the rest of the steps. We've been at it an hour and a half. I'm going to pretty much let us go until lunch, and when we come back after lunch, well, I tell you what time is lunch? Noon. Noon? I'll tell you what, why don't we do this? Let's take another 5-minute break. We'll start the 4th step, and then we'll break that before lunch. What do you think, guys? Would you like to do that or like to break for lunch? All those in favor of doing a little more, give me a hand. All those rather go to break till lunch. All right, so let's take 5, and we'll come back.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.